If there was a pantheon for California cult Cabernet Sauvignon, you would hear names like Araujo, Harlan, Checkerboard, Checkerboard. And tonight's guest on SIP episode 110 has ties to all of them, and he's choosing one winemaking technique in particular to emulate: barrel fermentation. Welcome to SIP episode 110 and Adolfo Hernandez of Monroy Wines. It is that time of the week where Friday, excuse my props, it's in here somewhere, SIP happens. So it is this evening with regards to barrel fermentation and limited production wines. Oh, by the way, my name is Martin Cody, co-founder of Cellar Angels. We are a direct-to-consumer wine company curating the best of Napa and Sonoma limited production wineries available right now. You're not going to find these wines in stores. You are going to find them on the Cellar Angels website. And there you can actually grab a sip kit. And I don't know if I see Scotland. That also is an unexcused absence. So there'll be some demerits in his bank account. But I do want to show the new folks how you're able to get these wines in advance. So you go to the Cellar Angels website and you grab a sip kit. This kit will have all the wines available October 28th through December 2nd. And the reason why I'm bringing up Scotland's name is because when we open up 2 bottles of wine, and we're going to be doing that twice in the next 3 weeks, it's called the Scotland. So the sipsters know what a Scotland is. It's basically just twice the fun. And we're all about entertaining, we're all about education, and we're all about engagement. So with that, cameras will be turned on at the bottom of the hour, and you will be able to interact one-on-one with tonight's guest. And I am thrilled to discuss this topic with you. I'm thrilled to have this gentleman with us to discuss it. And it gives me great pleasure and an honor and privilege that without further ado, I would like to introduce tonight's guest, Adolfo Hernandez from Monroy Wines. Hello, sir.
Hey, Martin.
How are you this evening?
Doing great. It's all good.
And also, there is no need to adjust your laptops or monitors or televisions. There is not a plum on your screen or anything like that. I did not get pushed out of a moving golf cart or car. I did willingly walk into the dermatologist this week, though, and as a Irish German person, and paying for the sins of the past, which in my family we refer to as bad parenting, because we didn't know what sunscreen was. So when you're a caddy for 10 years, you probably should wear that stuff. So this is what happens. So I beg your forgiveness on my appearance. Adolfo and I met in another example of the kindness of this industry. And it was with a young woman, by the way, who shall remain nameless until a little bit later on in the program, that introduced us. And then Adolfo reached out via email, and then he and I went back and forth. This is probably going back, Adolfo, 2 or 3 years ago, probably pre-pandemic, if I'm not mistaken. And
yep, 2020.
And then finally we were able to meet in person and learn the story. And it's an incredible story. And Sipsters, you're in for a treat this evening. Dahlia, nice to see you. Izzy, so good to see you. Doug sends his regrets. He also is getting some demerits because he's going to miss a few upcoming sips. But Adolfo, I want you to start at the beginning on, your background from Guatemala, where you lived, and kind of acquaint people with how well you knew wine. And you started making wine, I believe, at the age of 20 something, correct?
Well, yes. Formally, beforehand, we started around the age of 7. But
okay.
That's not really wine. You can skip that part if you'd like.
No, I like that part. I don't know anybody else that I've ever spoken to in 12 years of Cellar Angels that started making wine at the age of 7.
Yeah, so I take a bit after my mom, a little bit more quiet, a bit more reserved. My dad is the opposite of me. He's happy-go-lucky, wild, wherever the wind takes him. And so, yeah, we're Guatemalan. My father moved to the U.S. when he was 18, did the whole military thing. I was born in California, moved down to Colombia, back to Guatemala, to Texas, and then to Saudi Arabia when I was 6 years old. And we lived by the coast, Jeddah, And we had everything you can imagine, except that Saudi is a dry country, no alcohol whatsoever. And my dad needed wine to go with dinner. So we made our own. So we were in Saudi Arabia for 10 years. So from 1987 to 1997, we were making wine in our bathroom. No grapes involved, just grape juice, prison style.
Wow, that actually hurts my stomach.
It hurt a lot of people's stomach.
It's not often you find great wine that has the underpinnings of, we made it in the bathtub and there were no grapes.
A great grape juice. And it was basically just tossing yeast, tossing some sugar. It was just alcohol that passed as wine.
Now, I'm curious about your dad, Guatemalan. You moved, it sounds like 5 times or so before you were the age of 6. And where did his love of wine come from?
I think it came from the military. He used to hang out with all the officers, and he did very well in the military. And he's always loved food. He's a great chef. And if you love food, you love wine. It's part of the deal. Wine is a food. And so moving to Saudi, you couldn't get wine to accompany your meal. You had to do something about that. You can't eat a beautiful steak with a glass of water, I think.
Nope, it doesn't do yourself any favors.
No.
So then you were like this, probably just leaning on the bathtub, watching dad make wine, or participating in carrying buckets and stuff, or how did that all come about?
So I would worry a little bit because there was that one bathroom that was only for wine, and of course it's illegal, and I'd worry people are going to catch us. Nobody cared, right? But yeah, it would help him, measuring the sugar, measuring the yeast, telling him when to stop bubbling. But it was pretty simple winemaking. There wasn't much that could make it any worse than what it was.
So you're there from 87 to 97? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes. Then
where?
Then I moved back to the Bay Area, lived with my aunt and uncle for a year. Not to get into it, in Saudi, you can only stay up to a certain age. If you're not Saudi or you're not Muslim, you can only stay till about the age of 15. Then they want you out. So it's either go to Switzerland to boarding school or come back to California, live with my aunt and uncle. And so I came back to California. My parents followed about a year later. And yeah, went on to Cal Poly. I didn't study winemaking. I grew up thinking that you had to be born into winemaking. I didn't think it was something you could study. I just thought it was something that your family did, and you inherited vineyards, and that's how you became a winemaker. It was like it was in your blood type of thing.
Right, like a rite of passage thing. This is what my grandparents did, what I did, just right on down the line.
Yeah, I didn't think you could just study and become a winemaker. Like, how does that work?
So you went to Cal Poly.
Yeah, Cal Poly, did molecular biology, came out and started making organic pesticides in the Central Valley of California. So big scientist, I'm a big nerd, you can probably tell that already. So I did that for a couple of years, and I still liked wine. I drank wine, I had little wine experiences, but I was done with making pesticides, or so I thought. I wanted to move out of the Central Valley. I wanted to come back to the Bay Area. And I had a great job interviews lined up with Bayer, pharmaceutical here in Emeryville. And at the same time that I'm interviewing, someone had told me, wineries need scientists. It's not just growing the grapes, which I thought was amazing. So I applied to some wineries, and
I want to back up 1 second, because you said 2 words that I don't hear together very often: organic pesticides.
Yeah, so that's a whole conversation. But yeah, Bacillus thuringiensis, mostly BT. Like when you hear BT corn, you can grow the bacteria to spray onto crops, and it keeps it organic certified.
Interesting. That I did not know. So then you went to Bayer, or you were interviewing with Bayer for the chemistry side of things.
Yeah.
And a buddy said, wineries need chemists and engineers and scientists as well.
Yeah, and so Clos du Bois in Geyserville, 2 million case production, they offered me a job supervising their lab at half the salary of what Bayer was offering. And I said, what the heck, let's do this. I would love to make some.
What year was this?
This was 2006.
It's fascinating to me that in 2006, Clos was making 2 million cases a year.
And it was all good. all that
Yeah.
wine was good. Even the $10 Cabernet was a lovely wine.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
And so how long were you there? And then I'll have a follow-up question.
So I was at Clos du Bois 2 years. 2 years.
And so from an entry level standpoint, when you got to Clos and you were managing what you were managing, what were some of the epiphanies and takeaways? Because that's a huge production facility.
Yes.
And what were you just floored by that you had no idea the magnitude or size of?
So the size of the tanks, we had some blending tanks that were 100,000 gallons. And yeah, you climb up the stairs, it takes a while to get up there. And you get up there and you open the hatch and you realize that whole thing is filled with wine. It is pretty ridiculous. The bottling line goes 300 bottles a minute. And that's just one of them. We had a few of them. And the precision involved in making wine like that, it's a whole different ballgame. Quality has to be super precise. Everything has to be on point, because a mistake on the bottling line that even lasts a minute, that's 300 bottles. That's almost 30 cases of wine that you've lost for a mistake in a minute. So everything has to be totally on point. Which
my palms are sweating just thinking about someone looking over at the bottling line and bottles are just flying off because there's a mistake, and that'd be crazy at that speed.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts when it goes.
So you go there, you, like any young man would, you show up for the interview in a suit. How many other people at the winery were in a suit?
Oh, I almost forgot about this. Nobody at the winery was in a suit.
How many people within a 10-mile radius of the winery were in a suit?
Nobody that worked in wine, I don't think.
I love it though. I think it's a great story. Most of us showed up at our first, second, third, fourth interviews for jobs, always in the suit. I mean, it was, you didn't even think about it. You had to wear a suit. It was almost like, putting on your shoes. You wouldn't go in barefoot and you're not going to go in without a suit. Right. So I think that may be what was the first impression, certainly the first impression on someone that you met there.
Oh yeah. So the beautiful girl at the front desk, the receptionist, I meet the receptionist. I tell her I'm here for an interview. She tells me to sit down, and I sit down. I'm like, that girl's beautiful. I think I'm going to marry that girl, which I did 8 years later.
And Nohelia is on the line right now. Well, not on the line. She's in a sip attending. I would love to just know if she cares to comment in the chat. When Adolfo shows up in a suit and you picked up the phone and said your interview is here, did you also kind of muffle, he's wearing a suit? He's, just kind of, I'm very curious what the message and communication was back to the interviewing supervisor. So, and I think that's pretty prescient, Adolfo, that you said, I'm going to marry that girl, and you carried out with it. So what was it about Nohelia that you just said, wow?
You've met her before. You know right away when she smiles, that's a genuinely warm person, super sweet girl. Of course, she's gorgeous, right? And the more you talk with her, you see she's totally honest, genuine, fun person to be around.
Correct. And her smile lights up a room, that is for certain. Another couple housekeeping items. Hello, Peter. Hello, Paul. Good to see you, Charisse. I also want to let people know that Brent H., I'm not going to say his name, it was again last week's winner on the SIP quiz. So I'm not certain what everyone else is going to have to do, but Brent and Alyssa M tied. So the email blast came out, and within 4 minutes, you each had the correct answer. The question was, sherry and port are produced in what areas? And the answer was B, Huertas de la Frontera and the Upper Douro. However, just to let you know how smart the sipsters are, there was also a right-in answer a little bit later that says, hi, Martin, interesting quiz question, with B being the closest answer. Technically, sherry is produced in Huertas, Cellar, and port in Oporto, the lower Douro quays, although many of the red Portuguese grape varieties used to make port are grown in the upper Douro. Have a great week. So you guys are nailing it. You guys are just killing the quiz questions. We're just going to have to ratchet that up. And Julie F., who shall remain nameless, Julie, you know who you are, came in 2 minutes later. So neck and neck on the quiz question. All right. on to barrel fermentation. Well, actually, you leave Clos, and where do you go?
So I left Clos to go to MA Silva to make corks. I was getting my MBA at this time, and at Clos du Bois we were shifting. We had different shifts because we ran 24 hours, and so it was difficult to go to school and work. Sometimes cover night shifts at the laboratory. So with MA Silva, it was a more steady job, and it was a quality-oriented job. And we met a lot of wineries through Corks. Mostly they called me out to troubleshoot problems, which turned out to be overwhelmingly bottling line problems. Yeah, and so I would fix problems for wineries, and I fixed a problem for one winery that was not one of our clients. And there's Noelia.
Are these the? I'm trying to think of who was the Sunglass King back in the 90s, or yeah, not. It's too early for risky. Oh no, risky business. Little, I can see those sunglasses.
I'm sure they were aviators, Ray-Bans.
Yep. Awesome. All right. So then you are solving problems for wineries with corks and closures.
Yeah, and then we had one winery that was not our client, solved a problem for them, and they got back to me and they said, we need someone who's quality oriented on our team. We need someone to run our lab. We need someone to make our small winery operate like with the quality systems of a large winery. And that winery was Araujo Estate. Wow. So I had never made wine hands-on before, and I learned all high-end winemaking with my time at Araujo, and put in quality systems and upgrade the laboratory.
What were you struck by between Clos and not only the speed of production, the size of everything, then going arguably the opposite end of the spectrum from a production standpoint with Araujo? What were some of the things where you just were blown away at the level of quality at such a small estate? The level of the quality of the wine. I remember the first wine I tasted at Araujo was a 2008 Islay Cabernet. Okay. And I remember every second that went into me smelling that wine, because I never tasted anything like that. The level of complexity and intensity, it was like nothing else. The most expensive wine made at Clos du Bois was $50. And that was Marlstone, which is it's a good wine. Drink it anytime. But the Araujo Cabernet, it was the first time you taste the wine, you're like, this is really an experience. It's it opens your horizons. Like, you had no idea anything could taste like this before. And you mentioned it was the Islay Cabernet?
Islay, yes.
Islay.
Islay
right.
Vineyard.
From the Islay Vineyards. And you've obviously walked that vineyard 100 or more times. Why is that food source so special?
It's just that site. There's the alluvial fan coming off of Simmons Creek. There's the Islay clone that comes with the wine. The intensity of that wine, without being heavy or powerful, or without being heavy or overwhelming, it's like nothing else, man. It's it's probably my favorite California Cabernet. I still have quite a bit in my cellar. I treasure those wines. There's only so much that you can do winemaking wise, but a site really defines itself, and that is one of the California Grand Cru sites. Agreed.
It's interesting, and I like the way you phrased that. There's only so much you can do from a winemaking perspective to influence the wine. If you could put a percentage on that in the overall, but at the end of the day, the bottle, what percent of that bottle is winemaker versus what percent is, say, the site, Mother Nature, et cetera?
Oh, that's tough. I know you have Lise watching this. I'm sure she's going to come up with a different percentage.
Lise is 100%. It's all the viticulturists.
Yeah, I'm sure. With a site like Islay, I'd say it's 90% site. When you have lesser sites, the winemaking takes over. But with a site like Islay, all you're doing is guiding that wine, and you just have to listen to what the grapes want and just follow what the grapes want to do that year. That's how you make a beautiful wine from like a prestigious site like that. When you have common wines, it's up to the winemaker. You do what it's gonna do, you know. But a beautiful site like that, yeah.
And I like also that you elegantly called it and referred to it as a Grand Cru site, a nod to, you know, the best sites in France. And I do like where this is going, because I'm curious. And by the way, sipsters, you hear this all the time, and we've said it all the time, and we've interviewed guests all the time, where they will say things like, when you're working with a vineyard site like that, or you're working with this special block, you try to not F it up. You just try to stay out of the way, because the fruit is so special. And then you start moving to, I don't want to say modern wines or everyday wines, but you start moving away from site-specific wines where the vineyard is just the magic, and you get to the winemaker's influence. Does it ever get to where the winemaker's influence is above 50% of the bottle, or 60%? I mean, what's your feeling on that?
Yeah, if you're gonna make a mass-produced wine that's consistently good for $10 or so a bottle, that's winemaking magic to make that happen. And I say it in a positive way, because it takes very good winemaking to make a million cases of Clos du Bois Chardonnay as it tasted in the early 2000s. That was excellent wine. It was all beautifully made, and that was all winemaker. I mean, you're starting with good sites, right? But to make a wine consistent like that, just year after year, that's a lot of winemaker. Yeah,
you're right. It's formulaic to a degree, but there's also an influence in decision making. There's an influence on, you know, materials, pick, all of that stuff is winemaker, and how to bring it all together from a harmonious standpoint. And in a million cases, yeah, it's pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
So where after Araujo?
So after Araujo, we were bought by Chateau Latour in 2013, and I stayed on a couple of years after that. And then there was an opportunity to work with Martha McClellan at Checkerboard. And so
right now, I apologize for interrupting, but these are just marquee names. And Chateau Latour, heard of them. This seems like, if I'm listening and understanding your history correctly, this is kind of your first major exposure to potential French influence. Was there anything that they did after that acquisition that was new, or were you scratch your head and said, now that's a different way of looking at it or addressing this scenario that you took away?
So yes, although I'm not gonna, there's only a few things I'll say, you know, publicly, right? Because it's part of the mystique of these places is we keep a lot of things private. But with the acquisition from Chateau Latour, they took a little step back and made the vineyard more of the focus. And to emphasize this point, when Mr. Pinot bought the property, and he's, I think, the 30th richest man in the world, and he came out to the property to see what he had bought, and he brought Salma Hayek along with him, which was his daughter-in-law. All he wanted from his purchase of that site was a bottle of olive oil, a jar of honey, and a half bottle of Sauvignon Blanc. There you have the honey and olive oil that express the flavor of the earth, and Sauvignon Blanc, obviously, which does the same thing. He wanted that site just because the site was so special. And so we dialed back the New York. We what they did, which I loved, was Chateau Latour took really good care of the vineyard workers. They were already our staff, but after that, medical premiums paid 100%. We gave them all raises. It was a beautiful acquisition.
Super cool. I'm not going to lie to you. You had me at Salma Hayek.
She's a beautiful, awesome person. Very sweet.
I don't doubt it. Everything I've read, she seems very down to earth, and for arguably, she doesn't have to be, considering what she has, but she's very humble. Mm-hmm. So then you mentioned Checkerboard, and I'm building. We talk often, and no surprise, everyone knows that we prep with the talent, and Adolfo is this week's talent, in advance to just kind of make certain the tech is going to work, the video is going to work, and that sort of thing. And one of the things Adolfo and I both have a great respect for is the privilege and honor of standing on the shoulders of giants in this industry and learning from them. And this is an industry that they pay it forward like no other industry I've ever seen, to where they want to bring people along. They want to share with them and show them the ropes and teach them. And so you have Araujo, you've got Checkerboard, the Chateau Latour influence, and now you've got Checkerboard and their winemaker, Miss McClellan. That had to be pretty special.
Yeah, mostly because at MA Silva we used to make corks for her brands, and her corks were these beautiful long 2-inch dowels, and they were some of the highest priced corks we made. So it always had a mystique with me. And after making those corks and having the opportunity to work with her, I was thrilled. I was like, yes, I want to spend some time with you. I want to learn your winemaking techniques, because she was behind Harlan Estate and all those,
Yep.
Cologne and all those 100-point wines. And so I was going to be her winemaker for Checkerboard. She's a consulting winemaker, and I would carry out all the stuff that she needed, be her right and left hands for that property.
Did you ever pinch yourself and just go, what on freaking earth am I doing with Martha McClellan at Checkerboard as the winemaker?
Well, yeah, that was actually kind of fun, because before we started, they threw a party. Of course, Noelle goes with me. We're at this party at Checkerboard. It was kind of a harvest party and like meet our new winemaker type party, and it was just this beautiful thing. And you can see from the picture, Checkerboard is, Araujo is gorgeous, right? All these places are gorgeous, but Checkerboard, these guys own like half of Diamond Mountain, and you're just looking down. They look down onto the Castel de Amoroso, and yeah, when you taste the wines, the style is different, right? But I admit, like, I had a little, leaving Araujo, I wanted to go somewhere prestigious, and for me, Checkerboard and working with Martha, it clicked all the boxes.
Yeah, it's talk about the being in the presence of greatness and learning. First of all, you had a little bit of some knowledge with regards to the corks, and not many people notice or know. There's often a strong line with regards to cork length and quality of wine, because the winemakers don't want to take any chance that undue oxygen is going to get in, so they'll use longer corks. And those corks, as you just mentioned, are more expensive. So that adds to the overall bottle cost. But it also, at the end of the day, the product quality is far superior to what it may be had they chosen a different route. And in addition to that, what were some of the things that you learned as like barrel fermentation had to have come from her?
It was all her. So at Checkerboard, we also made her personal wine, her personal brand called Levy & McClellan. So we had two different styles of wine. Checkerboard is it's a beautiful wine. When you think of modern Napa, it's all modern Napa. Big, huge, plush, just oozing fruit and character. And that was mostly barrel fermented. And then Martha McClellan's site, her Levy & McClellan wines, that was 100% barrel fermented. And that was one of Araujo is beautiful, right? Levy & McClellan is also gorgeous wine in a slightly different mold. And the 2013 wine that we put into bottle for her, that was a 100-pointer for Robert Parker. That means if you like his palate. But that wine was also one of those seminal wines that was I had no idea that something could taste like this. It was absolutely gorgeous, and sold me entirely on the process.
That, I get goosebumps hearing how touched you were by that wine, because we sipsters know it. And when I interview wine people, and I have for the last, 12, 13 years, actually 18 years, what was your wine epiphany? What was your aha moment? And more often than not, it's when they taste something that is so brilliantly and superlatively crafted that it knocks them backwards. And mine was a Lynchbage from Bordeaux that I had no idea wine could do this. And it was incredible. I didn't end up making wine, but now I get to have the gratitude and humbled to be able to share great winemakers with a national audience. And I think it's interesting, that barrel fermentation process. So had you heard about it?
Yeah, we had heard about it because they wanted to do it at Araujo. One of the first years I was there, and the winemaker didn't want to do it because of how much work it was. And he had never done it before. And so that was scrapped. But yes, I had heard of barrel fermentation, and I assumed it was going to be a little bit easier than what it was, and it was a lot more difficult than what I had imagined. I lose about 10 pounds every harvest, which is nice. With Checkerboard, I think it went closer to 20. It was a lot of work to do this. It
is a labor of love, and I mean, it's done on white wines, specifically Chardonnay more often than not, but why is it done?
So when you ferment in barrel, for white wines, the reason it's done in barrel is to give more texture, more body richness to the wines. It's becoming wine while in contact with the oak. It's totally different from just fermenting in stainless steel and then barreling it down. So for red wines, you want to do the same thing, but you have to ferment on the skins. And there's no easy way to get the skins into the barrel. Some coopers will sell you heads or like devices that you can put doors into the heads. You can scoop in the barrel, you can funnel in grapes. It may work for some people, but the best way to do it is you have to open the head. You have to put the grapes inside. You can leave them on its head and ferment upright, but it's not the same effect as actually closing it and fermenting while rotating the barrels to give it the maceration. It's a more gentle, it's a more beautiful way. The analogy I came up with was a barrel ferment on its head standing up. That's like cooking on charcoal. Like, that's great. The meat tastes excellent. But when you put it inside the barrel and roll it, that's like cooking a steak via like sous vide. You get a whole different texture with it. It's the density of the wine is completely different. It's round. It's rich. There's a reason it's so difficult why people don't do it, and there's never a reason that says it just doesn't taste very good. The reason people don't do it is because it's expensive. It's hard to do. It's slow, and it takes up a lot of time.
Well, I was just going to say, you can't do it at scale either. I mean, unless you have a whole crew, and then that adds to the expense, and not only in supplies, but labor and human labor. And Mission Control is going to spin up a video or actually in the background of everybody, that talks about or shows a little bit about what this process is like. And Adolfo is pulling out nails from my toes, and then he grabs a hammer, and we reenacted the initial scene from Ozark. I have no idea where I'm going with this. But this gives you an idea. And Adolfo, you explain it.
Yeah, so you have to loosen the hoops to let so you have room to get the heads out. But if you loosen it too much, the barrel falls apart. And just so you know,
and that's right there where you were pulling the barrel apart. If you pull it apart too far, like you said, the staves will fall off.
Yes.
And the other band, yeah. So it's really a balancing technique. It's incredible.
So every barrel that you use for this, if you buy French oak and good French oak, you're spending about $1,200 per barrel. And you have to open up 2 barrels to fill with grapes to end up with 1 barrel of wine at the end. So there's that investment. Although I don't ferment 100% in brand new oak. I don't want that much oak influence in my wines. I like to ferment about 40% new and just keep it around that so that the oak is there, it's framing, but it's not overwhelming the wine. It's not the style of wine that I'd like to make. But yes, you have to be aware of how the barrel is flexing, how much to loosen the barrel, because if you don't loosen it enough, you can't get the head in, and you don't want to break the edge of the staves of the head staves, because then it will never close again. It won't seal.
Yeah, you can see well, maybe you won't, but on this head, there is a groove that fits inside the staves. So as you're pushing this apart, you could actually lose wine through the cracks. And as you're pouring it in. So then when you are popping the head out of the barrel, and I did not know that it takes 2 barrels to make 1. So now you've doubled the price, right? And then you also have to spin it versus just letting it sit on its end.
Yeah, you can't just let it sit, it'll dry out. Although with a barrel, you can probably get away with that. I wouldn't recommend it because, I mean, most of the cap is already submerged inside the barrel, which is nice. But yeah, you do have to spin it. It's harder at first when it's just grapes. Once you have a cap in there, it's a little bit easier. But yeah, it's a workout.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it doing it. How many barrels do you make? 3?
So no, I make about I do about 12 of those for myself.
12, okay.
And then I work for Benovia, and so I do some more barrel ferments for Benovia because I'm a good tenant.
You are a good tenant. And maybe Lisa and both of you could chime in. And I saw Larry Rowe also earlier, God, I have to stop saying last names. He's a winemaker though, from Grayscale. But from what I also read in researching a while back, barrel fermentation is specifically as it relates to Cabernet Sauvignon, the tannin in Cabernet Sauvignon and the protein is extremely clunky and long and, very not smooth, round, soft. And so the barrel fermentation process actually, to your point earlier about the sous vide method, rolling the barrel, it kind of coaxes and stretches and elongates that protein to soften it to a degree. So you get that well-roundedness. You get, it's not so angular. You've heard winemakers talk about that.
Yes.
Is that a little bit kind of what the flavor you're trying to impart and the softness and the elegance?
Yeah, there's a little bit of that also because I tend to pick early. I like floral. I like the savory notes of Cabernet. I don't like my wines to be jammy and fruity. And if you pick Cabernet early, it can be a little bit thin and harsh, and the barrel fermentation cuts the edge off of that. So if you smell the wine, it's cedary, it's violet, it's lavender. There's a lot of floral notes in that wine instead of being all black fruit or blue fruit. And the barrel ferment gives it the lift in the body and the weight in the mouth of a much riper wine without carrying all that alcohol. That's what I was shooting for with this technique.
No, and you pulled it off brilliantly because this wine is absolutely something special. I do want to go to our first poll question since we just saw a beautiful picture of Adolfo, and some of the sipsters we were wonderfully able to take them on a trip this year and show them the making of the sausage, the behind the scenes type of stuff. And they journeyed with us to Adolfo's facility. Well, not his facility, but where he spends most of his waking hours, and got to see this and got to try it. And trust me, having grown up on a farm and swinging sledgehammers a great many hours as a youth, this is not easy work. This is you could do a lot of damage to the barrel without actually moving that band because you can miss it a few times. It's kind of like when you're hammering a nail and you miss the nail and start denting the wood. You don't want to do that on a $1,200 to $1,500 French barrel. So you have to be very delicate with that. But here we go with regards to this evening's first poll question. Whether done with whites or red, dry ice is added to keep the grapes cool. True or false?
Do I have to answer this one?
No, you're not allowed to answer. All right, we're going to go 5, 4, 3, 3.5, 2.5, 1 second left. Final answer. Doot, doot, doot. For the longest time, there was only one renegade in the true column. There's a lot of folks that think dry ice on the ferment is bad. What do you say, Adolfo?
Oh, it's true. Yeah, dry ice, even to the white wines.
And what is the purpose of that?
So before it starts to ferment, you protect the juice with just a drop of or just a little piece of dry ice in the barrels.
Super cool. And you can actually, if you were to Google dry ice barrel fermentation, you'll see they just lay it on top of the grapes before they put the cap back on, and it keeps the grapes cool.
Yeah, and during cold soak, it's how we put dry ice in. For my cold soak is 5 days, so put dry ice to the hole, close it up, do the roll, and do it quick before the pressure builds up and it all shoots out.
Now, we might get to this answer a little bit later on in the show, but I'm going to ask the second poll question. And for those of you that got the first one wrong, there is a redemptive chance here. If Adolfo was not making wine, he would be a concert pianist, a Formula One race car driver, a genetically modified organism engineer for Archer Daniel Midland, a pro surfer. Apparently, no one thinks you can swim. 2 people. We're going to give this 6 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we do have some folks all over the board. The leading answer harkens back to your chemical engineering as a GMO engineer for ADM. What would you be that if you were not making wine?
Well, Noelle is the Formula One driver, and I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind being a GMO engineer. But my first love, I love the piano. I love playing the piano like nothing else.
Now, where did that love come from?
So I started. I started playing piano when I was 3 years old. I had lived in San Mateo.
Quick, come on, time out for a second. First of all, this is embarrassing. I suck. You're making wine at 7. You're playing piano at 3. I could barely walk at 5. I have the worst parents. Go on.
So my older cousin, he's 5 years older than me, and he was getting piano lessons in San Mateo. And so, of course, I wanted to copy him. So I got 10-minute piano lessons. And so the teacher at the time in San Mateo in his apartments was none other than Michael McDonald. Come
on.
Yeah.
So you're playing piano at 3 years of age with one of the Doobie brothers.
Yeah. And
now this is interesting. This is interesting because probably the individual, maybe besides yourself, that is the most musically skilled in this panel right now is Mr. Jeff Greasy. And I will say his name because that was his stage name when he was a musician, traveling musician. And he met you and did not know about the piano craze, but I think it's fantastic. And Jim B, who was also there, says he thinks you should be playing piano while surfing, which would be a feat. I like that. So if the wine gig doesn't work out, and by the way, we're a far cry away from that happening because it's working out, how would you manifest and how would you use the piano for your next career?
I think I would just be a beach bum and just find some cool place to play the piano, because I love old time jazz, like Thelonious Monk or Fats Waller, Art Tatum, and I would just do that, or teach piano, just live something real simple. Noelle would probably leave me, but that's playing piano is the only other. It makes me super happy. You're just in your own little world, playing piano while drinking wine. That's like uber happiness right there.
Yeah, and I think we also talk about a lot on Cellar Angels, and most wine lovers know that there's a lot of art and science in winemaking. And the art behind music is just phenomenal. And it can make you cry, it can make you happy, it can make you just by listening to it. So it's a very, very powerful medium. Piano, one of the top in that area because it's just so wonderful of a conveyor of emotion. I think the same can be said about wine. And it's really something to behold when you have a wine that is mesmerizing, like some of the wines that you've had the pleasure of working with and some of the wines that you're creating. And I want to talk about the 2018 and specifically kind of knowing your lineage that we've learned about this evening. Where did you source this wine from a vineyard perspective, and why?
So this is from Chalk Hill AVA. I was looking for well, there's a kind of a long story of how I ended up with this vineyard, which I'll skip. But I was looking for something a little bit cooler in a site that would sell me a small amount of grapes. Remember, with barrel fermentation, I can't work 4 or 5 tons of grapes. It's too much for me to handle with barrels. So I was looking around. It has to be under 3 tons. And so I found a vendor who would sell me Chalk Hill fruit from 20-year-old vines, and the clone I was looking for was 337. Gives a little more blueberry tones to the wine, and so found this site. Chalk Hill AVA, about 600 feet of elevation, cool climate. It just matched. It hit all the check marks I was looking for.
And why? It's funny because Lisa's on, and she's a clone savant. And we've had several other clone geeks that they geek out at clones. And just by the way, the same way some people geek out at Wagyu, some people geek out at, certain dishes. Grape nuts are the same way. So why the clone 337 from a Cabernet?
So it has small little berries, and it really expresses a kind of a blue fruit note, which is what I was looking for. I didn't want to make a big red, jammy, pruny Cabernet. And also 337 is what Martha liked. And I was trying to emulate more or less what she had done with her McClellan brand.
Did by chance, and I don't know if this is a trade secret or not, she made the wines for Harlan, I think in the 02, 03, 04 realm, early on.
And late 90s.
And late 90s. Was she a clone geek? Did she use 337? Did you learn about it there? 3 questions at once and absolute terrible journalism. I apologize.
I don't know if she used 337 at Harlan. And I'm not sure what their clone selection was over there. But I know she used it for her own stuff, which hopefully is not sharing too much. But she loves it. It seems to work really well with the barrel site, with the barrel fermentation program. So yeah, I know definitively Pinot Noir is the one that's more, when you get into clones, that's like a huge thing. With Cabernet, I've not found that it's like a huge deal. It's just more like tendencies. And hopefully it's not shaking her head at me right now.
What is the age worthiness of the 18, in your opinion?
20 years. It'll go easily 20 years. I released it 2 years ago, which is a little bit, was way too soon. This wine is drinking well right now with about an hour of decanting time. But yeah, if you have some extra ones, you can put it in your cellar. If you forget about it and find it in 5 or 10 years, it's going to be just singing and really lovely.
And it's interesting because Adolfo has a little bit of a underground cult following for his winemaking style of barrel fermentation and special vineyard selections. We did have a cellar angel come in and snag a case of your wine just yesterday of the 18. So they saw that. Yeah. And Jim B says, I'm not waiting 20 years. I'm with Jim. not a chance. So in addition to the Cabernet, what's new and exciting that you want to chat about?
Yeah, so so this year we started making Sauvignon Blanc. It's 40% barrel fermented. One of the barrels is only one new barrel in it, 15% new, just to give it a little bit of vanilla framing to the wine. It's all Muscat clone, so it's super floral and pretty, lots of tropical notes. And again, like I'm going to sound like a copycat, but one of my focuses at Araujo was a Sauvignon Blanc, and that was my big. I didn't want to say I'm like white winemaker, but because it's not technically true. But I was making the white wines for Araujo, and then I brought a little bit of that over to Checkerboard. So really pleased to have a Fountain Grove District Sauvignon Blanc, Sauvignon Muscat, which will be released in March.
That's amazing. I'm looking forward to tasting that. I do notice you did not tell us about that in July or sample it. So note to self, you're on our naughty list as we approach the season of nice and naughty list, just FYI. But we will get some of that in the near future. I did want to chat about, I take it easy, Jeff. I can demote you and just turn off Jeff's camera. It is Barrel Lives season. But let's actually just show folks where you're located or where you source these wines from. In the episode, we all like to refer to as Google Earth. So it is, come on, Mike, you knew it was coming. So for those of you that are new, and we hope you tell others about the fun you had this evening and the education that you learned, because we're growing the community and we can't do it without you. But this is where we play the wine region that Cellar Angels focuses on. So founded in 2010, all we do is wines from Napa and Sonoma. And I want to get the roads off of there. Thank you. And so you have Napa and Sonoma counties. Every week I have to redraw these maps and they're not to scale. So any, what's the map guy called? Mapographer, or who's the dude that draws maps? That didn't go to chemical engineering school for No, not okay. So this gives you an idea of just how little Napa County is compared to Sonoma County. But I marvel at it all the time with the complexity of the soils that are here and learning about the elevations. And we're going to show you a couple things with regards to some news, but also Adolfo mentioned Checkerboard. So I want to share one thing about a bankruptcy. And this happened this week. For those people that are a little bit older, Jeff, I'm looking at you. This is Jim B. Does anybody remember this house from the late 70s, early 80s television show? The Munsters. Okay, Mission Control has had way too much Cabernet. No, this is the Falcon Crest house. So Falcon Crest was a television show. I myself was watching Linda Evans and what's her name? No. Dynasty. Joan Collins. That was Dynasty. Okay, so Falcon Crest was Lawrence Alamas, whomever that is. So this winery, Spring Mountain Winery, filed for bankruptcy this week. So that's rather unfortunate. They have $180 million of a loan that they're unable to pay. So that tells you a little bit of an idea of just how expensive this business can get. But Spring Mountain Winery and Spring Mountain Vineyard is right here. And I'm stopping there because now I do want to put in places. And last week we learned a little bit about why all these towns are where they are. And so if I pull back and I go from Napa, where's my, I got to move this, carry the one. Napa to Yountville, you can see right over on the right-hand side, just a little over 8 miles, but these things are all 7 miles apart. I go from Yountville up to St. Helena, right in the 7-mile range. St. Helena up to Calistoga. I can stop to Calistoga, 8-mile range. And we learned this last week with regards to all these towns, same thing over here in Sonoma, by the way. You go from Sonoma all the way up, or from Petaluma to Pengrove, just about 7 miles. Pengrove up to Santa Rosa, just about 7 miles. Santa Rosa up to Healdsburg, or to Windsor rather, just about 7 miles. All those towns are 7 miles apart because back in the 1800s, that's how far the stagecoaches could go before they had to stop and change the horses. So these towns popped up along this area because of the stagecoach line, and these stagecoaches would get robbed. And some of these towns are named after various bank robbers and things of that nature. But the Falcon Crest house is right off of Spring Mountain, right here. And some of you that did not watch it because you were watching Dynasty like me and Linda Evans. And by the way, who was the blonde siren? The young one, Mission Control. Come on. No. Sally Joe. Come on, someone throw it in chat. She's famous. She went on to star with not Melrose Place. No, she's all right. Let's go to Checkerboard. For those of you that are joining, we're playing 1980s soap opera. All right, so Checkerboard tasting area is down here if you happen to get an invite. This is Route 29. You do, if you remember, if you go way past St. Helena, you pass Toomey right here, then you can see Calistoga up here in the distance. But where Adolfo worked, these folks, hang on, I got to get rid of the ruler. They own Heather Locklear. Thank you, Lori. Lorenzo Lamas. So you've got Checkerboard here. They own this, they own this, they own this. So you're talking about some amazing elevation changes. And that's just the vineyards they own. They own all of, 2/3 of the mountain. So this was basically Adolfo's grooming grounds, where he just got to walk these vineyards, learn the whole production. But then he decided to go here to source the Cabernet that we are drinking this evening. And I'm going to back out a second because you can't really see how large Notre Vue Estate Winery and Vineyards is. It is about 650 to 700 acres of land where you enter here. This whole area in here is all been donated to California Conservation and will never be developed. But Adolfo sources his Cabernet from this very special block right up there. Now, when you zoom into this, it's actually called the Summit for a reason. And it's on a pretty nice plateau. So was there something, Adolfo, that resonated with you as it relates to higher elevation Cabernet, the clone, all of it?
It all matched up because I wanted something. I didn't want valley floor fruit. I wanted something up on a hillside or up on a mountainside. Clone 37 with older vines, and this hit every single check mark.
Yeah, it's a pretty special place. Now, you mentioned Chalk Hill, and this vineyard estate actually straddles Chalk Hill and Russian River Valley, I believe. But next week, we have, some of you may recognize this estate right here, David Jeffries and Kelowna. So the Angels took a little stroll up here, and it's a little slice of heaven. It is not that far away as the crow flies from here to there. So that just gives you an idea from orienting where we are in this region of Sonoma. It's an exceptional region. It's an amazing Cabernet, but I also know that this was hit pretty hard in the fires, and going forward, you're sourcing from a new source. Tell us about that source.
So my vineyard block has been burned through a few times, and now it's replanted. So in 2021, I shifted everything over to Kick Ranch Vineyard in the Fountain Grove district. And it's funny you mentioned Spring Mountain because Kick Ranch is on the Sonoma side of Spring Mountain. So the Sauvignon block comes from there, and the 2021 Cabernet will come from there as well.
So do you know Sam Baxter up there?
I've met him before.
Okay.
It was a while ago.
Yeah, that's
Terra Valentine, right?
Terra Valentine, correct. That's a special place up there on the Sonoma side on the top of Spring Mountain. So
it's a good one.
So how do angels, sipsters, friends of Cellar Angels, there's like 6 people that I'm referring to. How do they taste with you?
So the best way to taste is book a tasting at Benovia and just say that Monroy sent you, and just tell me you'll be here. I'll come get you. We'll tour the cellar, and sometimes by pure coincidence, my wine will be open and you can taste it.
By pure coincidence. As luck would have it, we just happened to open up this wonderful array of wines.
Shocked that bottle is open.
Yeah. And by the way, Benovia is a pretty special producer of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So as I literally had a bottle of the Chardonnay last night, not myself, just it was open. Could have a bottle myself. It's pretty good stuff. There was also another new addition to the Hernandez family.
Oh yeah, I think Noelia is carrying her right now.
Okay.
and she's wondering, why isn't my husband home to carry the baby?
Now, how old is the baby?
She's all of 5 months old, man.
Oh man,
yeah.
And absolutely incredible. So not bad, not a bad little circle of life to meet a young lady at an application for a job in the wine industry when you're taking a 50% pay cut, end up marrying that young woman, having a child with her, and a now growing family, producing your own wines. It's pretty special. And we're happy that you shared it with us. I do want to ask a final question. You went through the aromas and tasting of this. What would you pair this with? So
personally, I prefer pairing it with charcuterie. Braised short ribs would go really well. Anything that's got some tannin and fat, I would stay away from sweet foods with this wine. You want something really savory that's going to really bring out the flavors, and something with a lot of fat will make the tannins just really sparkle in the mouth.
Outstanding. I like that. I like tasting things with charcuterie. That is an awesome way to do it as well. We mentioned Chalk Hill. We are going to be going deep into Chalk Hill next week. But before I do, what's the case production on this one?
So 125 cases, although I think 2018, all I have left is 12 cases of that one.
Are you putting any of that away in kind of a library type of thing so you can taste it in 10, 12, 15, 20 years and invite Charisse out because we cannot wait 20 years. So
yeah, I keep a library for myself. And then we have special magnums just for myself and Noelia. And, you know, what's actually funny is that the cork company made us special corks. If you look, that's me and Noelia. So we have special corks for our magnums and for our wedding. That
mission control. Why don't we have corks? We need corks. I like that idea. So you have 125 cases of this. What'd you make of the SB?
SB, when we bottle it, it'll be close to 200 cases.
All right. So what does the future hold for case production? Because you're getting close to, this is no longer a hobby. This is a full-time job type of thing.
I wish I could grow bigger, man. But with I have to make wine for Benovia, and if I were to grow any bigger, I'd have to strike out on my own. Because I would love to have a lower price wine like a Merlot made more in an accessible style, and make 200 cases of that, and still focus on making this age-worthy cab. Because I know it sucks to wait for the wine to get into its right spot, but it's worth it, I think, to make a beautiful wine.
Yeah, it's pretty special. And it's so fun to learn about the intricacies and the behind the scenes process. And I hope everyone got an appreciation for just how challenging and lengthy the process is of barrel fermentation and how physical laborious it is, because you've got to touch these barrels one by one by one and time it. And it is not for the faint of heart, and you better be skilled with the hammer. Like I said, you can do a lot of damage to a barrel and end up spilling a lot of wine, and that's no bueno.
It makes better wine.
Spanish.
It makes better wine. So you want to do it.
No, exactly. So next week, I mentioned we're going to go deep on Chalk Hill with David Jeffrey of Kaluna Vineyards. This is actually another interesting story, because if this gentleman was producing his wine on the other side of the valley, it would be 3 or 4x what it is. And I would say the same thing about Adolfo's wine. If this was on the Napa side, this bottle would be $150, easy. And I am so thrilled that you are here, my friend, and we're able to share your story of just playing piano at the age of 3, making wine at the age of 7. Thank you for making me feel like a slacker. Appreciate that. Hugs to you and your lovely bride. Thank you for spending your Friday with us. Sipsters, you guys are the best. Thank you all. Wishing everyone a wonderful, safe, festive weekend. We will see you next week for episode 111. Cheers, everyone. Be good to one another.
Thank you so much.